So I feel most comfortable with like the Q&A thing. So I would really like to do, like if you guys have any questions about my work, I'd like to just answer those right off the bat. I guess I can say right off the bat that my work, just to describe it in a line, would be about the history of ideas, focused on death and beauty and perfection. So it's very general. I get my ideas from a lot of sources, from articles I read about biotechnology and aging, about, you know, I also should say that my imagery comes from death crowds and also swaddling babies. So it's from birth and from death. So I'll just say that, and then if you guys have any more questions, can kind of discuss.
What course of study, what did you read that started this avenue of work?
I think I first started reading about cosmetic surgery. And then from there, that led into biotechnology, and biotechnology led into death. Because biotechnology is really about the amelioration of the body, so making something that's bad better. You know, making something more beautiful, finding perfection, and prolonging life. So that's where I started. And then that kind of led into these ideas of death and the continuation of life and how it's perceived.
And deliverance from the corpse, is that something that...
Yeah, it's the idea in Taoist theory that a monk would die and he would just leave a husk behind, but he would somehow continue to live. So there's an aspect of immortality in that. There's a lot of religions. I'm really interested in religion because usually there's a focus on immortality somewhere in it. You know, whether it's heaven, whether it's nirvana, there's the idea of a soul, and that's something in the body continues. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I find the concept really interesting.
This doesn't have to do with your concept as much as my admiration for your drawing skills and the way you place things on the paper or the canvas. I mean, I love to hear you talk about your concepts, but I also like to see the placements of things.
Yeah, the composition is really important. I typically I want my figures to feel isolated. And so this painting here, I did in 2010, and then I reworked it last year. And in that one, there's a background. But I almost feel like having a desolate background makes the figures feel more isolated. Because, you know, we live in an environment, and there's an environment there, so we can really connect with that desolation. And that's why I chose to sort of move away from that and just work on bare canvas and bare paper, where there wasn't, you know, I don't know that the environment really helped the concept anymore. I don't know that, I mean, I think the figures feel isolated enough and you kind of get that idea with it being a little more minimalist.
This piece on the back wall here, I mean, the red areas, is that shadow? I mean, they almost look like pools of blood in a way.
Right.
But there's almost kind of like an out-of-body experience because they almost look like they're elevated a little bit above those puddles.
Yeah, the perception, like for how the figure is dying, is definitely more up than back in space. So that means that the space is really limited, so it's more contained. You know, it's not going back in space how a normal body would if you were looking at something head on. It would be, the feet would be a lot lower, and there's be more perspective. But yeah, the alizarin crimson is what I use for that color, and that's a big color in my palette. Usually alizarin crimson, gradient white, which is just a really vibrant white color, and also cadmium yellow, which is a really warm color because all the other colors I use are really cool colors. And the yellow really gives a figure life. And that is a shadow, but I understand that it can be perceived as blood, but that's okay because, you know, that has a lot of really heavy symbolism behind it too, blood does. And I didn't use a pure red because that's just too heavy. I think alizarin, the crimson color is just a little slightly darker. You know, it represents the shadow a little better, and then I can reflect those colors back into the skin just technically. If you have like you can see all the darker crimsons and the different areas of the skin.
What about your linear quality of the shrouds?
What do you
Well, I guess I'm curious if you did it because it was a contrast to everything else, or if there was a specific reason.
Yeah, well, I really wanted to contrast the space, so I wanted to bring out what's important. What's important to me is the figure. So the shroud is more conceptual, but the figure is something that's beautiful, you know. And I really use all the images I take for the painting or drawing that I'm making. It's all very specific. So I use light and shadow to create form. A lot of painters and a lot of artists will use like contour lines, so forming, you know, on the figure, on the muscles. And some don't really use that, some like more flat figures, but I really enjoy form, and I really enjoy bringing out muscles and the structure of the body. I think it's really just a beautiful thing, just on a really basic, fundamental level. But as for like the lines and the shrouds, yeah, I just wanted to contrast the reality of the body, which in fact is something that will decompose in time, versus, you know, something that is an object. The shroud. And also the shadows, typically since they don't have a space so ground the figure, they help create a space even though it's lacking an environment, because it grounds the figure in the space. Any more questions?
I noticed all your figures have their eyes open. Is
Yeah.
that something, a message or the concept you're trying to
Yeah,
convey?
for the figures, usually when I paint a figure, I start with the eyes, because the eyes is what gives the, before you paint the eyes, you're just painting an object, but when you paint the eyes on a figure, it gives it life. So that's always what I start with. And I didn't necessarily want these, you know, the idea is about continuation, it's about death, but not necessarily, it's about more than that, you know, like what doesn't die, I guess. And so I think that because we're social animals, it's really important to keep an expression. It's really subtle on these figures, but it's something to respond to. You know, it's not just like this one is covered. So this one actually feels like a corpse, as opposed to these where they don't necessarily feel like corpses because their eyes are open, because they still have a lot of life. The color isn't, you know, the color is really vibrant still. It's not really the color of death.
Are they supposed to be levitating or living life?
You could see it like that. That's an interesting interpretation. I guess that comes with not including the background, but that's something that I think that, you know, that's something that is a beauty you can bring to the table. Like I said, I don't include the environment, and the perspective is not what it would be in real life. You know, I distorted the perspective to make the bodies feel like they're more vertical instead of horizontal. So I use the shadow to ground it to make it feel like it's on something, but it definitely can be used as levitating. It's going to a different space. Yeah, the space is something that can be interpreted, because the space is deliberately not depicted.
What is your interest in the birth and the death, that whole symbolism and process? Is it scientific?
Yeah, I'm really interested in biotechnology. That's what I've been reading about for the past probably 2 years. But I found that when I limit myself, when I try to focus too much on one image with one concept, my work becomes very stale. And so I try not to do that. I try to leave it more broad. I think it leaves it more open to discussion. You know, and if I focus too much on something like the biology of new technologies, incorporating the body, then it becomes too technical, you know, for an open discussion. And death and biotechnology and prolonging life is something that sort of applies to everyone, because even if you are religious and you believe on the continuation of the body or the mind or, you know, anything like that, it's still questionable.
So you're not trying to make a statement or sway an opinion, you're just kind of trying to
No,
more or less put
I mean, I
information
think
out there.
in terms of religion, which is, you know, I've used a lot into that, just researching death stress, because certain religions that use those, it's not, I think that religion is really useful for some people and not useful for others. But I think it's really interesting that the history of religion, I think, is really interesting. But I'm open to everything. I think that for those that pursue that or incorporate that into their lives, it's probably because it helps them live a healthier lifestyle, right? But it's not necessarily what I try to do. Yeah, it's more about the concepts and discussion, I think. What excites me about art is really just talking to people about how they interpret something, and if they're an artist, how they make their work, how they approach it, and how things are perceived by people who are looking at the work.
The question is, have you visited Canada?
Yeah, I have. I visited different ones when I was in Thailand. I went to a crematorium there. I've been to morgues here, where they just have like the people on the walls or
George.
yeah, George. Yeah.
So did your parents start wondering about you and start hanging all the corpses?
I don't know. Yeah, I guess it can be interpreted. I think people typically perceive it as something that's really dark. But I don't necessarily perceive it that way because I think that the discussion is really beautiful. I think that the body's a beautiful thing, and so it's more exciting to me than something that's dark and scary.